you can click through Canvas and get into LabArchives. So like, for example, the first experiment would be the kinetics lab. If you go under the kinetics lab, that's this part right here. You should be able to go to LabArchives directly through Canvas, because I have it linked so that you don't have to log in. You can do it through Canvas. Apologize for the delay here, but that's what it should do. As soon as you click on the module for that particular experiment, then it'll take you directly to the page in Canvas, in LabArchives, that you need to complete. Okay, so this right here is the background information. And then you don't have to go back to LabArchives. You can just go to the pre-lab. And when you click the pre-lab, this is what you will see. You will see the a description, the title, and then it'll tell you, this is not March 2nd, of course. I gotta change that. Let me just make sure I have the right notebook. Yeah, this is the wrong notebook. You see how it says spring 2020? That's the wrong notebook. I have to go to fall. I don't know why it did that. It should take you to the fall 2020 course, and the course information is just going to be what the lab is about. You can, within Canvas, I mean LabArchives, you can go to the syllabus, the schedule, safety policy, and the lab manual, which is right here. So that's at the very top. A lab introduction, you click on that, it gives you the pages that, again, is in my website. This is just the introduction part and the safety part, etc. And then the experiment starts here. So if we go to the experiment link, this takes you to my website for each of the experiment. Here would be the, if you look at your lab manual, this right here would be not quite the same format as your lab manual, but pretty much close, because it takes a little bit, you don't have the flexibility that you have in Microsoft Word when you put it in LabArchives. And so see this D, that's supposed to be a double arrow. I need to go in there and clean that up, but you get the idea. This is the whole laboratory experiment that's found on this part. The next part is where you would put in.
Professor?
Yes.
That's what we're supposed to end up having, or something that looks like that?
Yeah, something that looks like that. You guys should see the entire experiment when you click on kinetics studies of crystal violet. Okay. And then when you go to, you don't do anything on that page. That page is purely informational. Okay. And you have that same page in your lab manual, or if you download the lab manual, it's the same page. Okay. I just decided to put it here so that everything's contained in LabArchives. But this next part, A, B, and C, are the heart of your write-up. You click on A, that's your intro. Remember we talked in writing, keeping a lab notebook, that you have the pre-lab. Well, this is the pre-lab. In here, you need to write the introduction. You need to create a header. And that header should be the objective. And I'll show you an example. You need to create a header on the sub. You can always create headers by going up here and creating headers, okay? You need to practice this. And then another header that says background information. And then another header that says procedure. So that's going to be found in these sites right here. Let me show you that in someone's notebook. This is someone's notebook, I believe. No, that's not it. Yeah, this one. So this is somebody's notebook, and this is their experiment. This happens to be experiment 4A. So this student made a header objective, and then they wrote the objective. And then I went in there and wrote down, I provided a comment. This could be a stronger objective. Other than the objective, this is a really good intro. So that's my feedback to the student. And I'll do that per section when you guys do your write-up. This is a background information. Remember, this is a titration lab, and this student was able to do this background information. They got an illustration of the titration process. They point out the important features in that titration curve, and then they show the different type of titration curve that they would generate in this experiment. So that's the background information, okay? This is a pictorial flowchart, and they didn't draw it. They actually took like different pictures from around and then just put together a pictorial flowchart. Other people did draw it in a lab composition book, and then they just took a picture of that and then they pasted it. Okay, so that's allowed. Let me see if I can't find a student who did that. I think she did. And in here, yeah, she drew it out. So you can see that that's certainly acceptable. But again, I don't want just words. I want some sort of illustration, because I want you guys to walk through that experiment in your mind, and that means that you are much more prepared when you do the experiment. So again, they are putting the heading, and then they're putting in the information. This is the safety information. Put the heading, and then they put down the information. It's as if you were writing it in your laboratory manual, except now you're typing it in. Okay, so let me go back over here. So that's the pre-lab. You can go to another experiment, let's say thermodynamics. And again, the experiment will be the first one that's shown, and then click on the pre-lab, and that's where you're going to put the introduction. And in this particular case, the introduction for this experiment is 15 points, whereas in the beginning, I put more points on the pre-lab because I want you guys to be sure to work on that more. And then the body of the experiment, the post-lab, isn't weighted as much. Towards the end, the body of the experiment, the post-lab is going to be weighted more than the pre-lab and the data and the discussion. But I want to walk you through so that you're concentrating in the beginning, the pre-lab, and making sure that's fine. And then towards a third of the experiment, we're going to emphasize the data and observation. And then towards the middle and towards the end, you're going to look at the post-lab. And then at the end, you're going to start, and your evaluative report, you're going to put it all together and make sure that you're paying attention to the write-up for that. So again, this is all you will see in the pre-lab. And it's up to you to fill it in with 1, the objective, 2, the background information, the procedure, which is a pictorial flow chart, and a sample data table. So here is the intro. This is the sample data table that the student put in. They just put it in, they use, remember that when you guys are the editors, let's start this. Sorry. See how there's nothing on this page, but if you hover, you guys can insert rich text file, and then on the rich text file you can start editing some sort of, here it is. Okay, so it looks like there's nothing there, but you just have to hover your cursor over that, and then you start clicking, and then you can create the editor there. So this right here will be something I type in, okay, the context. If you write it in Microsoft Word or Google Docs, then you can copy and paste it right here, and then just worry about the format. If you need to write a mathematical equation, you got an equation editor right here, okay? You can put special symbols, you can add photos, okay? So that's basically the editor that's available in LabArchives. Cancel. And then when I read it, I will I'll create an editor and put in my comments to make sure that you guys get some feedback on that. So that's the pre-lab. The data and observation, we click on that. Notice how this has changed, and then you can always go in and insert rich text, or let's cancel this. I can do insert heading, and I can say data and observations. Okay, and then I can insert rich text file, and then I can start typing in the data. So even though there's nothing there, you just have to hover your cursor so that you can insert. And the choices are, when you want to insert, let me cancel this, are going to be rich text file, that's your editor, assignment, heading, click on more to see what else you can put in. Like you can put in a mathematical equation or an attachment. Like if you have a data table and you want to put that as an attachment, this is how you would do it. Okay, so it just takes practice. That's the main thing. You have to practice it, and probably by the second time around, you guys should be pretty proficient so that it's second nature. And it's good to learn, because with all this thing going on where everything's being electronic, everybody's working at home, that's the way of the world. Everything's got to be digitized because we want a permanent record, and the way we do permanent record is much more easier using digitization format. And the way we do that inside, where a lot of scientists are moving, a lot of universities are moving, is the electronic lab notebook. I know that like Columbia University, some of the IB schools are now geared to electronic lab notebook, because that's where we are in terms of doing a lot of these things. The old-fashioned way of writing it down, that's still good, but we need to get you guys trained for the world that you guys are going to see when you start heading into the workforce environment. So this is your data and observation, and then turn that in based on the due date. And then the post-lab, click on that. Again, there's not much to it because you have to fill it in. All the information that you want to use to complete that is found right here, where it describes the background information. It describes the procedure that you guys are going to be doing. It describes the calculations that you guys are going to be doing. It tells you what the key points of your discussions are, and then the post-lab questions. So it's found right here in the description. It's found in your lab manual. And here, it's basically just a blank slate where you put in that information. And then if you click over here, that 07X, well, that's where I take your pre-lab, your data and observations, and your post-lab, and I put the points in this page. So suppose you got, say, 20 out of 20 in the pre-lab. And then in your data and observation, you got 10 out of 15. Okay, so that's 30 so far. And then in the post-lab, you got like 50. So you got 65 points. Well, see this 0.70? Well, I can't make this 70 points because then Canvas will think this assignment 70 points, and then it'll take the other assignments, 7A, 7B, and 7C, and that adds up to 70 points. So the whole assignment would be 140 points. It's not 140 points, it's 70 points per experiment. So that's why this is 0.7, because I want to show you what grade you got for the overall experiment, but I don't want to give you 70 points. So if I put 0.65, then just multiply it by 10, and that's total points that you have, where I added up the pre-lab, the data and observations, and the post-lab. So this right here is a summary page that shows you the points that you got for this experiment. Okay, so that's what you will see in all of these. You'll see a fraction of the total, 0.7, and then when I write a number there, that's the total multiplied by 10 that you got per experiment. So let me just show you what students have done in the past. So this is a student who did, and this would be the titration experiment. So let me walk you through her work. So she put in a, now make sure you keep the format that was introduced in keeping a lab notebook. So the first thing that she should have wrote here is the objective, not the intro, but the objective. And it looks like she may have, maybe she didn't even, she put the objective in the intro. I want a separate heading, okay? I want a separate heading. So let's go over here, take a look at that. So this student, this student did not give me the, let's see. Yeah, she did give me the objective as a separate heading, and then the background as a separate heading. And then the procedure as a separate heading, and then the procedure. And then a sample data table, that really wasn't necessary, but that's good too. Safety information, and then post-lab. And I don't think there was a post-lab on this, otherwise it would have been included. Since there wasn't any post-lab, then she didn't answer that. So let me go to another experiment and see if, let's go with this right here. Again, should be an objective right here, background information, sample calculation maths relationship, sample data table, safety procedure, and then post-lab questions. So again, that's the way it's organized, and you notice how this particular student certainly went in and made sure that it was easy to follow. That's important. Then after that, we take a look at your data and observation. And this might, we actually, this is the experiment. And this student, this was a semester in which students actually met in class. So this student sort of took a picture of her setup, and that's always good, and then wrote some observations, and then put their data table together, and then took screenshots of their Logger Pro data and put it here. Okay, so that is data and observations. Let me go to another student. And then go to a different experiment so that, again, you get a flavor of how these things are put together. You're not just doing it blindly. So data and observations. So this right here is the equilibrium lab. So they're doing the observations. They're looking at the different reactions that are taking place. This particular is an equilibrium. This is experiment number 2, where they have to prepare different solutions in different test tubes. They tell the different volumes for the different concentrations. And then she wrote the different absorbance for each of these based on the data that they gathered. She put the temperature here, okay? And then she took a screenshot of the data that was obtained using Logger Pro and made comments on each one. So that was an experiment that was done for experiment 2. Here's another data. Again, it's going to vary depending on each experiment. This person took a picture of the thermodynamics experiment where you have to dissolve potassium nitrate, cool it down, and heat it up. Here's the cooling process, and then this is the warming up process, and then this is the data. So a lot of times the data is going to be pretty concise. It's not going to be drawn out, and this is the perfectly fine data. I would ask her to write a little bit more detail in her observations. You get an idea of what I'm looking for in these portion in LabArchives, okay? Then let's take a look at the post-lab. Let's take a look at this. This is the post-lab for experiment number 2. This person, again, after reading it, I kind of give a summary of the points or feedback on each section. This is the calculation and results. And I think she did this in Excel, and you should be doing it in Excel. She just copied and pasted the screenshot of that particular segment from Excel and put it right here. Other students would just put in their Excel file. I prefer not to do it that way. I want you to take a screenshot and actually paste it. That way, when I'm reading it, I don't have to stop and open up the Excel file. I can actually see it right here. In this particular experiment, they have 4 test tubes, and then a 5th is the standard. They have the absorbance. They calculate the concentrations of each of these chemicals at equilibrium, and then they calculate the equilibrium constant, and then they do the average and then the standard deviation. You guys are going to be applying some statistics, but I will show you what type of statistics to apply for some of these things. And then she writes a discussion. Then she answers some post-lab questions. So that's going to be that one experiment. This is another experiment in which, again, this is the post-lab. She compiles the data that she got from the data and observation, put all that in the graph rather than leaving it in Excel. And then her discussion really should be before the post-lab. Keep to the format that was in activity 2. After the data, the calculation, the results, the discussion goes in there because you want to talk about the results. And then conclusion, and then post-lab questions. Post-lab questions is finally the last thing that you put in your report, okay? So let me give you another example of her work. Chloe did a lot of her work, especially in the procedural flowchart. She took time to kind of like draw it in and sort of colored it, but that's a quick and easy way to do the pictorial flowchart. Okay, this is her data and observation. She took a picture of what the chemicals looked like before they put it in water. This is the setup as they're doing the experiment. Notice the digital thermometer right there. When it's being dissolved, as it crystallizes out, and then the data that she got for that experiment. And this would be the write-up based on that. Anything that you can do to make it stand out, you get lab technique score. Okay. So again, I just want to make sure that you and I are in the same page when it comes to LabArchives. If you want to work ahead, you can certainly write the pre-lab for the first 2 experiment, okay? And practice, and if you want, you can let me take a quick glance at it and give you some feedback. But that's really all I have for you today in terms of our lab. If we were meeting, I would actually have you guys go in and write a pre-lab for a fictitious experiment. The other thing that you can do in LabArchives, if we were in lab, is if you have a smartphone, you can actually dictate your observation as you're doing the experiment. So it'll actually type it for you in LabArchives using the dictation function in your phone, and then it'll type it up. And then of course you have to edit and correct any misspelling. But that's the versatility of LabArchives, is that you can use your device, whether it be a computer or smart tablet or your phone, you could actually dictate into it, and then it'll be translated through the dictation program that you have in your phone into LabArchives.